cybersecurity in AI and ML, InfoSec ChatGPT problem in business. All of these topics are very serious. And if you stay until the end, we're going to give you the 3 top ways to protect data privacy, intellectual property, image, and reputation. And I'm going to be joined by David Clarke, who is an expert in this area. He's the founder of the GDPR Technology Forum with over 21,000 members, an internationally known GDPR and security advisor. In the past, he's had multiple positions within security management, such as Global Head of Security Service Delivery and Chief of Staff, Global Head of Product Enablement, and Head of Security Infrastructure for Global FTSE 100 companies. And these days, he specializes in the development and implementation of risk and compliance services, GDPR, ISO27001 and SOC2. So welcome, David. Lovely to see you again. So machine learning is now built into everything, right? Isn't that like a massive risk?
For a long time, yeah. For a long time, yeah. What one of the most useful features that they've been using it to analyze log files. Any of has ever analyzed log files, it's impossible to really do it with a human. There's just so much of it, yeah. And then to find the trends in it is very complex, takes forever. Using AI, you've almost got an instant result. And for that, it's absolutely amazing. And it is probably not a job that anybody really wants to do. So much as I love going through logs, you can overdo it.
So what is a log?
It's basically a record of any type of transaction. So if you have keep it simple, you've got a desktop, you've got a virus checker. If it finds any anomalies or any kind of weird happenings going on, it will record that as a piece of text to a big file, normally centrally managed, and you will probably get 100 of those a minute. And which ones are important, which ones are not important? Probably 99.9% are not very important. It's that 0.01 that you may want to take a closer interest.
Right. So you're sort of saying it spots patterns and anomalies for analysis and prevention of cyber attacks, right? And obviously for forensic analysis as well. Yeah, that's been used for a long time, these sorts of technologies. But I think as we've already spoken about prior, it's great that we're getting to the next level.
Good analogy. Yeah, absolutely. Because things are changing all the time. It's not like an attack will necessarily follow the same format every time, or if it does, it may be over an extended period, and it just may not be easy for a normal person to just pick that up. That's why AI really comes into its own.
So where are we then with ChatGPT and InfoSec specifically?
It's a phenomenal tool. It's absolutely kind of incredible what it can do. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Italy was one of the first as a country to ban it, primarily on data protection grounds. They were worried. I think previously noticed they weren't happy with the legal basis for collecting data, and I think that one of the other big ones was age verification, because it could be collecting child data. How do you verify a child's using it, and how do you make sure that data is either deleted or managed appropriately? So I think they've got a bit more time to fix some of it, and they fixed as much as they could quite quickly, and I think it is back for use in Italy. But this is a problem that we have already. It's not just a GPT problem. I read somewhere, and I think this is roughly what it said, was that by the time a child reaches 12, there are 94,000 collectible data points on that child, which is phenomenal. And obviously that's where data protection, data privacy comes in. How do we regulate that? How do we manage it? How do we make sure parental consent is in place? Same problem, but this is probably a little bit more intense because ChatGPT, it's the argument is potentially that it can take over search engines. Don't use a search engine, just use a language model like ChatGPT to do it. And why not? Thing is, they can be wrong. They can have misinformation. Also, can the internet, so can search engines. But it's just making sure that potentially there are safeguards in place. And I think that's where these things are going, to make sure that there are safeguards that can be managed, and there is a level of accountability that can be demonstrated to make them work properly.
I heard a lot about restricting these. You are used to GDPR and InfoSec first approach within businesses. Is that what you would recommend, that a business needs to really focus on those items before they even think about rolling out GDP, ChatGPT within their environments?
Almost all companies now, they're all tech connected. A lot of their info is all cloud-based. And the thing with ChatGPT, because part of the problem is that you may have some great intellectual property, but you may use it to reword an article you've written about it or a document. What's to say that ChatGPT is not using that information to build its own database and then sharing your intellectual property? And there's been a lot of discussion on the artwork ones, where they develop fantastic kind of pictures in different styles, different artists. And those artists, is their style, their intellectual property, and now the computer is copying it. Is that fair? Is that right? Should it be doing that? So it's how should that be managed? So suddenly who is the owner of copyright? Who is the owner of intellectual property? And should it be shared?
Well, this is going to keep lawyers busy for years, and they're going to use a lot of technologies in order to track down this intellectual property theft. And I think that is a very interesting prospect in itself. And with cybersecurity, it's the same, isn't it? When hackers get better at hacking, technology improves, and it's the same. It's just different sides of the coin, of course. So yeah, hugely interesting, thought-provoking concepts to think about.
And kind of going on the other side of the coin is that they're learning models. They learn. So if you feed them with enough information, you can get them to learn the wrong thing. Is that a new concept? Absolutely not. There were many examples. I'm going to quote during the Second World War, where I think, especially in the UK, we had blow-up tanks and wooden kind of armaments all over the country. So when pictures were taken, it looked like we had a massive kind of tank advance, somewhere in the country being stored, and all that information was disinformation used to advantage. And you can do, I know at the moment, I don't know if it's still happening, but you can do that with some of these models. You can influence them. They are susceptible to bias. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Same concepts, but at a much faster rate and to be done locally. You don't need anything really clever to do this.
I mean, it's certainly a minefield in these areas. And as the tech companies ramp up their efforts to create something amazing, then obviously bad actors and people will try to propagate bad information, creating deep fakes and all these kind of things. It's kind of a little bit worrying, I must admit, to be honest. But I think we all need to take responsibility around these things.
And I think there's a couple of things there that's kind of pointed out. There is going to be, and I don't think it's in place yet, they are looking at how you regulate AI for these very purposes. But we're already seeing this in social media for a long time. Disinformation on social media is very, very widespread.
I mean, a lot of businesses must be very worried right now, especially with their competitors taking on these AI technologies at such a rapid rate. So, it must be very worrying. What are businesses actually doing at the moment, apart from some perhaps burying their heads in the sand?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think burying your head in the sand is obviously one strategy, but sooner or later it's probably not going to work. And it's new technology. You don't really want to be left behind. I think that's a mistake to ignore it. It's how can you manage it? How can you put a level of control in place? I think that's just as important. I think it's easy to say, yeah, our company's banned it, but you may pay the price for that further down the line when your competitors are using it and getting better results and leveraging, staff capability and performance. There are things that can be done. I think we're going to talk about them later, but it's really kind of understanding that it probably shouldn't be stopped, but it should be controlled and monitored. That's for sure.
as per usual, governments are kind of getting involved with these sorts of things, and it's a challenging situation for them, and they're going to need to really learn about how these things work very, very quickly in order to put the right regulations in place. But in the meantime, businesses are using, these sorts of technologies that kind of layer in over the top. Is that do you think they're a really good kind of way to sort of prevent potential damage from these sorts of things?
Where things are probably heading, the guardrail concept, where the guardrails can be overlaid on these models, large language models, and provide the transparency, fairness, privacy, security, and accountability that's required, and they will improve as well. So things will get better all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many benefits from using this technology. Obviously the productivity piece, we're just really at the kind of beginning of that, actually. But a lot of businesses are reporting at the moment like 40 to 50% increase in productivity. But what are you seeing the benefits are in your space for this technology?
Being able to leverage staff's capabilities and skills to a much higher level, much faster. And if you think about it, that's been true for all of this. Word processing, Excel spreadsheets, they were all doing the same thing. The ability to find information on the internet. I think there was the story, wasn't it, that people don't buy Encyclopedia Britannica anymore because there is no need. It's kind of been replaced by the internet. So things move on all the time. Huge amount of information is already available. What works, what's right, what's true, I think is the difficulty. We're seeing a lot of disinformation, or should we say modified information, and that happens every day. We see it on the news, we see it on social media, and I think that's always the challenge. On how do we kind of make sure that that is appropriate and it isn't causing harm to people. And that's where data protection is coming in and diving in quite rightly too, making sure that early in. I mean, one of the things on the we were talking about earlier, the Italian Data Protection Authority, they wanted to make sure that there will be authentication of age, so youngsters under 13 can't be using it. So I thought, tell you what, let me ask ChatGPT what its answer is. So I did type that in, and they basically said, ask the person how old they are. So I guess it's a start, but there's a long way to go. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the ways that we're kind of seeing companies doing it, I think obviously probably the quickest to market, if you have nothing in place, is to provide proper training and guidance on how to use it. Explaining that you can use it for some things, and other things where it involves personal data, intellectual property, people's names. Be very, very, very careful of how you use that. So that might involve workshops or some kind of guidance to do that. That can be done quite quickly. A lot of companies now are developing what's called guardrail software, and there are some great models around, and they're open source as well. You can basically put a layer of software protection, so it creates a level of enforcement to make sure the principles of running AI, as we mentioned before, can be managed. And the other interesting one, and actually I have to say I'm kind of using that myself, is a localized language model. So basically you have the whole model locally, and you design it for your own use, so it's not connected to the internet. It's all managed, you train it locally, and that can be done as well. So you actually have an in-house, inverted commas, ChatGPT type model, and they work quite well. It's quite surprising that you can actually use that. Most of them at the moment I've seen open source, so it does mean you do need your developers working on it, but that can work. So kind of three things that can be done. Probably you need all three of them. It's probably the reality sooner or later.
Well, I think over the last few months, we've had huge developments. And, if you think about the way that this chat GPT and all of these language models are kind of taking over, you actually need to look a bit deeper and look at the open source movement and how that has affected the world in the past. If you just look at the way that us as a people can actually contribute towards something meaningful, for example, like WordPress or other open source softwares. Like this video software, I believe, is an open source software. So let's just keep our eyes open. I think apparently the open source software solution that's been released is actually going to overtake ChatGPT, and actually potentially the Google solution that they're working on. I mean, let's just keep our eyes peeled. And I wanted to thank you so much again, David, for joining me and sharing all this valuable information.
Thanks very much for listening to Influential Visions. Please make sure you share this episode with your friends and business